What if GLP-1s aren't just weight loss drugs, but a healing tool for people whose bodies are desperately sounding the alarm?
He said, your heart's enlarged and it's not pumping enough to keep up with the demands.
Before he became one of the most influential patient advocates in the GLP-1 world, David Knapp was fighting diabetes, heart failure, and the crushing weight of untreated obesity.
Living with obesity affects your mind, your body, and your soul.
GLP-1s didn't just change his health. They changed his entire world.
The sun was shining brighter. The colors in the trees were popping more.
I'm Elizabeth McGann, your guide to a holistic approach to GLP-1s. To take our free How to Microdose Masterclass, just click our link in the episode description.
All right, Dave Knapp is in the house, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. This is fun. Super excited to chat with a fellow GLP-1 enthusiast.
Yes, it's good. And Dave, I want to start by saying I'm a genuine fan of your work. On the Pen has become my go-to source for breaking news and grounded insights on GLP-1. It's badass.
Thank you.
Yeah. And honestly, I think you might be the most informed guest we've ever had on the show when it comes to the cutting edge developments in this space.
Awesome. A topic that I love to discuss. I probably wake up in my sleep talking about this stuff. I eat, breathe, sleep, and exist in this world for sure.
Oh, we're going to have some fun. And I know the audience is going to love it. But before we dive into all the things I want to talk about today, gene therapy, compounded access, and all the innovations you cover, I want to start with you.
Let's do it.
Yeah, you've shared openly about living with obesity and type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
Can you take us back to that emotional moment when you realized something had to change?
I would be going back to many moments, I think. I've lived with the disease of obesity, diagnosed, maybe for like my entire adult life, right? And life has been a constant bringing back to that moment of something has to change, right? I feel like I dieted for most of my adult life. Like I was talking to somebody, it was interesting. I was in Vegas this past weekend for the health conference, and I brought along a friend of mine who's very interested in like holistic medicine, has found a ton of value in it for himself. And he happens to be a professional football player who, again, does not live with, he's a big dude, but he doesn't live with the obesity. He's just a big NFL lineman. And through a series of unfortunate experiences with doctors, was prescribed something that led to a couple of torn Achilles tendons. And he's like, well, tell me like what the experience has been like. And I said, dude, it's honestly easier for me to like think of times where I wasn't dieting because they weren't that long, right? Every year I would diet for 6 months out of the year, 8 months out of the year. I would be restricting in one way or the other. It's just that restriction would ultimately lead to, the other side of the roller coaster, right? Your ups and your downs. And when I was down, I was really down. And so every few months I would be brought back to kind of this point, like I gotta change something. And for me, that was usually keto. And when I was in the doctor's office in 2021 in the fall, I got a diagnosis for type 2 diabetes. I was shocked. I was like, 6 months out of the year, I'm really minding my P's and Q's when it comes to carbohydrates. And I never have been a sugar eater. Always the non-nutritive sweeteners when I drink soda. And so I'd been cognizant of that my whole life, having a lot of diabetes in my family on both sides. It's a very long-winded way of answering your question, Elizabeth, but it was just like a lot of moments. It's hard to pinpoint. I could definitely talk about when I was diagnosed with diabetes, but it was kind of just like another moment, like, okay, something's got to change again. But the thing that changed was always kind of the same. It was like kind of reverting back to what I knew, which was keto. And I write in my book about just how keto, the thing that sucked about keto when I first went on, I was like 18, I'm 40 now. This thing that sucked about it is that it worked. It worked really well. And for my 20s, it was a really good, like if I went back to it, I could just lose weight. And it was really good until it wasn't. And so it's the thing that I was always chasing was that success with that diet initially until it just didn't work for me anymore.
And did it not work because it was too restrictive to just not eat a carbohydrate or keep it? Were you doing it traditionally, like 20 net carbs and under?
Yeah. So it was actually keto. So it started with the Atkins program. But I mean, you can imagine if you've watched some of my content, like I'm somebody who really I like to learn. If I'm passionate about something, I'm going to go really hard after it, almost like myopically focused on something. Right. And for me at that time, it was this idea of low carbohydrate and getting your body into a ketogenic state. So it's like hyper aware of what it took. So for me, it was like 30 grams or less a day, 20 grams or less of net carbs. Net carbs kind of became this, real fad thing. But really, as long as I kept it under about 30 total and under 20 net, I could stay in ketosis. So I always had it's ridiculous. Like if you open the cabinet in my cupboard, there's just, the pea sticks. And eventually it went to the finger prick where you can actually test your blood. And I've had the keto breathalyzer that exists now. So I've done it all.
Yeah. Did you ever do the CGM?
Yeah, actually, I wear those constantly. I have one on right now.
Is your diabetes now in remission?
It's a really pertinent question because when my doctor said, you have diabetes, what do you want to do? Might surprise some people to hear that my first answer to that was, I don't want medicine. He's like, okay, then you need to eat keto. So I was like, okay, well, I've yo-yoed on it for 20 years, but I know what I'm doing with it. And if it's going to help me live longer for my kids and my wife and be around, I'll do whatever it takes. And so I was wearing a CGM that whole time. So the frustrating part was my doctor knew I was doing the right things. And so he was getting frustrated because at the end of a year, I had an A1C of, without medicine, an A1C of low fives, but my weight didn't change.
Ah, okay. So you're no longer diabetic, but you on keto, but your weight didn't change. And how much weight did you have to lose?
So I was at 319 when I was diagnosed. And after a full year, my A1C went from 7.9 to 5.2 or 5.3, but my weight went from 319 to 312. It was at that moment where, and I knew going into it, I told the doctor, I was like, keto used to work for me losing weight. It just stopped. And my insulin levels were off the charts, which was another thing. So
while on keto, your insulin was still off the charts?
So they were off the charts when I started, and they were still off the charts after a year when they tested my insulin levels. So it did not work to bring my insulin levels down. Now, fast forward to 2025, so to May of this year. So you ask if my diabetes is in remission. I could get it in remission, obviously eating keto. And the whole time I've been on Mounjaro, really doesn't matter what my macronutrients are. I've been doing pretty well with average blood sugars, maybe around 105 to 110. The interesting thing for me is that in May of this year, I had a really crazy heart thing happen. I don't know really how to explain it other than I had been feeling some fatigue and some lightheadedness. And I thought, oh, this isn't right. And I almost collapsed at the grocery store, which ended me up in the ER. And they basically told me that day that I was in the ER that I was in heart failure. They said, your heart's enlarged and it's not pumping enough to keep up with the demands and it's backing up into your lungs. And I was like, okay, so what does that mean? He goes, well, we'll give you some medicine and we'll send you home. You're not dying. So we'll just send you home and you'll see a cardiologist and they'll tell you what's going on. In the waiting period to see a cardiologist, I end up in the hospital again, same thing. And I was actually admitted this time. And over the course of the next few days, they ran every test known to man. And by the end of the week, my heart was not enlarged anymore. And it was keeping up. And I passed all the tests with swimming colors. Or that's not a phrase. It is now. I passed all the tests with swimming colors.
I like it.
They used to fly. Now they swim. So it was amazing. It was a deeply spiritual event for me because, as a father of 4 kids, I was just a few days from turning 40, father of 4 kids, husband to a loving and adoring wife. I just said to God, I just illuminate whatever it is in my life that needs to change. And it just was very clear to me that the Lord was telling me to get rid of alcohol, which was something that the way that I describe it, I realize there's a lot of people, a lot of opinions about this stuff. I didn't consume a lot of alcohol, when I consumed it, but I consumed it often, right? So it was a routine. Got to the end of the day, kids were down. Yeah, I've been building this thing for the last couple of years and just going hard, and I've been doing it with the day job. And so it's how I got my body to wind down and rest. And so I felt very clearly that was something that I needed to give up, that rhythm and routine of using alcohol as kind of a wind down relaxation tool. And I got rid of it cold turkey after I got out of the hospital. I still maybe had a drink or two here or there, like on an anniversary or a birthday or something. But I would say since May, I've had like 3 drinks. And the crazy thing for me is, one, it wasn't that hard, because to me, it was just like it's a very spiritual thing. So it's like, you're supposed to do this. This is what you need to do to be healthier. And so it just was like, in my heart of hearts, the thing I want the most is to just be present and available for my family. And my blood sugar sugars, like, I don't eat keto at all anymore. I just I'm trying to lean into the getting rid of the restrictive idea, because for me, I realize for some people that's going to work. You're going to cut carbs out, or you're going to eat only meat, or you're going to eat only vegetables, and whatever you do, it's going to work great for you. More power to you, blessings on you. But for me, that I know what that cycle that leads to, and it's toxic for me. So kind of getting away from the idea of restriction and leaning into this. So I don't eat low carb, and my blood sugar averages over the last couple of months have been at like 85. Which is like the 4s for an A1C. And so to me, it's almost like there was a metabolic switch that was flipped when I gave up the alcohol. And it wasn't immediate, right? Because even I've struggled as what they call a slow responder to GLP-1s. I lost most of my weight very early on in my journey, and then kind of stayed there, and then started actually creeping back up the wrong direction. So I went from
on a GLP-1?
On a GLP, yeah.
Okay.
So within 4 months, I'm an OG in the space. So when I first started Mounjaro, I got to do 2.5. The next month I did 5, but there was no 7.5. It was like the magical dose. If you found it, it was like finding a unicorn. So I had to skip that one. So I went straight to 10. And then there was no 12.5 either. So I skipped 12.5 and went straight to 15. So within 4 months, I was on 15 milligram. Within about 6 months, in hindsight, I had maxed out at what the medicine alone was going to do for me from a weight loss perspective. I went from 312 down to 276. But then for the remainder of my journey up until May of this year, it was like going back up to 290 and coming back down to 280 and just bouncing in there until May of this year. And so I had given up alcohol. People were always like, what are you doing with your diet? It's very hard to be in this space making content every day and not be the guy who also has the story of, I lost 100 pounds on Ozempic. But I think it's also what's kept me engaged in the space too, because I know if this hasn't been the answer for me, it's not going to be the answer for other people too. And I think a lot of people that do see success on GLP-1s kind of, not a lot, but there are people who sort of revert to that same mentality of you just need to eat less and move more, which is what everybody who was told before the GLP-1. Then they got the GLP-1 and lost the weight, and they were all for stop badgering people about this. It's not helpful, until they lost the weight with the medicine and can't understand why somebody else didn't too. These medicines hit different. People have different levels of metabolic dysfunction. What I believe I've discovered for me is that the source of my metabolic dysfunction was alcohol. So, here I am. Am I in remission from alcohol or from diabetes because I gave up the routine of alcohol? I don't know. I think TBD on that. But with an A1C in the 4s and not eating keto to do it, I'll realize I'm on the 15 milligram dose of Mounjaro. But it would be interesting to see if we pulled the medicine, what do I do? But I feel like I'm rediscovering metabolic health just by way of eliminating alcohol. That was the thing for me. And as we sit here today, I'm 265. So now I'm the lowest weight that I've been in 10 years because I'm losing weight again.
And you're on 15?
15, yeah.
All right. Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that. How do you think Mounjaro changed your body, but not just your body, your relationship with yourself?
It's a really good question. I think one of the things that I noticed when I first started Mounjaro was I felt fullness. I physically felt it. And I honestly cannot, there were maybe times at like Thanksgiving where, everybody stuffs with very, dense food and you feel like, ooh, I ate too much, right? That feeling. But having the feeling of eating a normal portion of food, like I've always seen, like I don't have any family, my sister sitting next to me here. It's funny. She helps me with my podcast too. So we got the sibling thing going. Just like you and your brother. But my siblings, none of them struggle with obesity. Neither of my dad was a little bit on the overweight side, but I wouldn't say he had like clinical obesity. My mother doesn't struggle with clinical obesity. It's rampant on my mother's side, which is kind of interesting. If you compare my physical features to my siblings, I express all of my mother's side of physical characteristics genetically, etc., where they all express more of my dad's side: dark hair, brown eyes. I have blue eye. I'm the only one with blue eyes and blonde hair. A lot of obesity on that side of the family. And so being able to eat a normal portion that, I've always seen the people around me eat and then go, I'm done. And because I physically got that signaling for the first time or restored or whatever, I don't know. I felt full and it was foreign. And so to me, and I said this a lot in my early, like old YouTube videos, I just said, I'm eating normal people food. So in other words, I'm not having to eat keto. I'm feeling normal people full. And so just a sense of normalcy is what Mounjaro really gave me.
It's beautiful. And it's interesting. There's so many questions I could ask you about your personal story, and I want to get more into that maybe a little bit later. I want to really understand. I want to pick your brain a little bit.
Let's do it.
You've built a reputation for breaking down GLP-1 science in a way anyone can understand. What's the biggest myth people still get wrong?
The biggest myth that people still get wrong. Well, first of all, I appreciate your generosity in setting up all these questions. You're making me feel very good about myself.
Yeah.
It's very kind of you. The biggest myth, I guess, there are myths that are still held within the community, and then there are still myths to dispel in the larger, broader conversation about obesity. I think the biggest myth in the mainstream, like with just if you were to just poll your friends, right, that don't live with obesity, that kind of like, I know Elizabeth has a podcast. Like, I'm sure you've experienced this where you're trying to explain to them what the meds are, like, and tell me if you've experienced the same thing. But I feel like it's just a lack of understanding. Like, what people have is just a general perception that's been shaped by media, news media, traditional news media. So they've seen articles about the black box warning for cancer, which has actually been in human trials, I shouldn't say trials, but in human data that we've compiled, is actually completely false. It's the other way around, but it was observed in rodent studies. So they have the black box warning. I think that's like one of the biggest thing. And one of the things I always, if I'm making content and I'm sort of channeling that person who's out there who thinks that, and I'm always kind of like, you taking those shots, you're going to get cancer. Like, that sort of seems to be the vibe of a lot of people out there in the real world that don't live in this GLP-1 bubble like we do. It's just that if you take them, you're going to get cancer. Well, first of all, if you don't treat obesity, there's a huge increase in the risk of like 13 different types of cancer. So would you rather me treat it, or would you rather me just go on the way that I have been? Because we know that causes cancer. So that's a huge one, I think.
Well, and Dr. Tina, I remember her sharing a lot of information about GLP-1s, and she put out her hypothesis about this black box warning, saying that this class of drugs, these peptides, are going to change the pharmaceutical industry so much, and perhaps even eliminate 30 to 40% of the drugs that are on the market, because by taking a GLP-1, you may get off your blood pressure meds, your heart medications, some of your kidney medications, inflammation medications, and that it's almost a way. And this company, Novo Nordisk, what country is it out of?
Denmark?
Yeah. It's almost a way to slow them down. That was her, hypothesis. It's so
Yeah.
who knows? But yeah,
She's awesome.
yeah, I really like her.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She's like, she's become like, so you meet people along the way doing this. And I don't know if you have people like this, but then like you meet people and sometimes you just do the podcast and it's nice to meet people and it's really fun. But then you meet people who become like a really important part of your journey. Like I met Tina at the perfect time because first of all, we just connected on a lot of levels. But then when I had my health scare, she was such a sweet friend to have because she's so freaking smart, first of all. And just was like so willing to just let me kind of like dump on her all the things that I was going through emotionally and trying to balance not only all of, the health stuff, but like the demands of trying to build something cool, in terms of doing it online. And so she's just uniquely understood all that. And she's just fantastic.
I have a question about your health scare, just the timeline of it. So when you were rushed to the ER with heart failure, they diagnosed, were you already on Mounjaro?
Yeah, I'd been on, so this was May of 2025 when this happened. So I've been on Mounjaro since, like I gave the timeline earlier, I've been on Mounjaro since the fall of 2022. So like 3 years. Because that was like the first question a lot of people had. Like, it wasn't the shot, was it? Like, no, I'm sure whatever it was, because whatever it was seemed to be transient, right? But whatever it was, it seems to be, my opinion would be that it slowed the progression of whatever caused that. You know what I'm saying? I like imagine that I would have been still 319 pounds. How much more serious would that like sort of event have been if I was, 40 pounds heavier? So I think if anything, it probably delayed what happened.
And you got the information, you had a moment where you felt your higher power shared with you that you needed to stop drinking.
Mm-hmm.
You did. And your heart condition cleared up?
So the heart condition was wild. So I was too dizzy when I was upright to do anything. That was like sort of like the whole problem. And so when they wanted to do a stress test, I was like, I can't walk. I don't know what you don't understand here. That's why I'm here. Like I can't be upright without feeling like I'm going to fall over. And so I ended up having to do a chemical stress test. Have you ever had to do one of those or have you ever heard of how they work?
Tell us how it works.
They're super scary if you've never been through one. So essentially what they do is they take you into a room, they lay you down on a hospital bed, and then it almost feels like the vibe is like you're about to get a lethal injection. And then when they give it to you, it kind of feels like they are giving you a lethal injection. So it cranks your heart up to, like 200 beats per minute. Like you're just laying there, they inject you and you feel this like weird warming sensation come over your whole body. And then your heart's like, pop, 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 pop. And you're hooked up to all these machines and there's multiple doctors in the room in case anything goes wrong. And then what they do before they give you that injection is they give you this like radioactive dye.
Oh
and
my
they take an image and they watch how that radioactive dye in your bloodstream is moving through your heart. And then they ramp your heart up with this injection and let you sit for a little bit. And then they put you back under that machine to sort of watch where that blood went and how it reacted after your heart was under a tremendous amount of stress to see if there's something wrong structurally with your heart. And I remember, so after I received the injection, so I went into the thing the second time, and this gets like deeply spiritual and personal for me, but there's a story in the Bible of a woman who had a bleeding condition and she had become like an outcast of society, and Jesus was walking through her town. And so the people were trying to keep her away, but she had this faith where she knew if she could just get to the hem on the garment of Jesus' clothes, that if she could just touch that in faith, that she would be healed. So she crawls through the crowd. And the story goes that she gets to him, she touches his garment. He doesn't see her. The people around don't really see her because crowds around. But Jesus stops dead in his tracks and he says, "Who just touched my clothes?" And he says, "I felt the power go out of me." And so even through this, that healing was transferred to her. And I just remember, so to me, as I'm praying, going through this, I'm praying for obviously for nothing to be wrong. And all that's going through my head are the faces of my 4 children, the face of my wife, my family, And I literally just felt like, my act of faith was just reaching out, like as I laid there on that table, just like reaching out and, figuratively kind of like grabbing it at that hem on that garment. And so for me, getting the results back on that test, knowing something was wrong, like I had been experiencing such a high level. Well, first of all, I'd seen it on the imaging prior to the enlarged heart, everything, everything came back perfect. And so, I had just felt like I had experienced a healing and sort of like a new lease on life in a way. And it really changed my perspective on a lot of things, not just alcohol, right? Because that was like a minor thing. I felt like for me, this was the removing of the alcohol was just an act of obedience. It was like I had received this healing and I was being told clearly in my heart that was something that I needed to get rid of as a routine. And so I did. And so, yeah, it was a huge moment for me to experience that. But this was all pretty fresh. It was just May that all this happened.
Thank you for sharing that. I think weight release, weight loss, and health can, when it's done correctly, it is a spiritual experience.
For sure. I mean, everything's interconnected, right? Our mind, our body, our spirit. And one of the things that I learned very early on, and this is something that I'd say I was taught by the community and just hearing their experiences in the comments, the live streams, and all the things that we would do, was that living with obesity is something that affects your mind, your body, and your soul. And so when you go to address it on any level, it has to be addressed from all of those angles too. And that's why I really appreciate there's a new definition out about obesity. I can't remember the entire thing, but the beginning of it, I think if you can just remember that when you're having conversations with your loved ones about the topic, is that obesity is a chronic, multifactorial, relapsing disease. And I think those three things, like chronic, meaning it's a long-term thing you're dealing with, like rheumatoid arthritis. It's relapsing, meaning you might get it under control through diet and exercise, but your biology and the disease are going to fight back to bring you back to an obesogenic state. And the multifactorial is, there are genetics involved. There is trauma involved. There is environmental things involved. It's not pretty. It's not cut and dry. It's not clean. When you talk about being able to define it for people, your lived experience with obesity is going to be unique to you as your fingerprints are. No two people experience it exactly the same way, though there are commonalities that we all deal with. I don't think you could ever put together all of these factors exactly the same way for another person as you could for yourself. So it definitely deserves care that matches that.
When you gave up alcohol and it wasn't a huge consumption, huge volume of alcohol you drink, but it was a daily. In releasing that, in 12-step programs often talk about when you substitute something that is getting in the way, whether it's a behavior or a drug or a drink or a person or gambling, anything you continue to do despite negative consequences, to fully shift out of that, you have to replace it with a relationship with a power greater than yourself. And that emotional, spiritual piece. It's interesting that when you turned that over, your weight loss, not only did you heal, but your weight loss started to accelerate.
Yeah. I mean, it started to exist again. The weight loss, I think, was symptomatic of just a body that was being healthier, right? I think when we hold on to things, and I mean, you can probably educate me on this, right? I'm saying probably, you can probably say why, but I think there are physical manifestations of holding on to things, unresolved trauma, anytime you're doing anything that especially maybe goes against your convictions, your personal convictions, there's a physical toll that's paid, right? Of anything that kind of like points to that or validates that?
In terms of the actual biochemistry, I don't know if I can speak to that mechanism. That said, time and time again, when people let go, I call it dropping the weight, when they let go of trauma, when they let go of the limiting belief, when they let go of the toxic relationship or whatever that is, you will see an acceleration in their healing and also in their weight release. And it often becomes sustainable as well. That yo-yoing tends to stop.
I would be curious to know. I mean, I'm glad I don't, but I'd be curious to know if I kind of ignored that, in that moment. Like maybe I'll just give up alcohol during the week, or maybe, and I have had a drink or two since May, like, to mark an anniversary or birthday or something, but it was the routine, right? And I think for me, again, I apologize for getting super spiritual because I know not everybody shares similar or the same, religious experience that I do. But for me, I think ultimately the giving up of alcohol wasn't about the routine and maybe not even what it was doing to my health. I think more so is that it became the source of my calm. And so allowing a substance to be the source of my calm and a chemical to be the source of my calm was perhaps a replacement for my reliance on my faith in God to find the rest for my soul that it was looking for, right? And one of the things that's interesting, I realize you didn't have me on to discuss alcohol, but here we are. I love the way that these conversations take shape sometimes. We think it's going to be one thing and then we're like, whoa, what just happened? But I think the chemical dependency on alcohol for me was not something that I even realized until I didn't have it anymore. And then I go, like, my nervous system kind of went haywire for a couple months. It was kind of scary, honestly, because that calm that it was used to getting daily, in a sense that it was a routine that I took part in. It was at night after my kids went down. So it's like I wasn't waking up and slamming a 40. But, at night, when I would calm down, it was like once that was removed, it was kind of like my nervous system didn't know what to do. And I had really high anxiety for a period of time until my nervous system kind of like mellowed out and learned to do it on its own again. And I think it's interesting to me because there's so many things, even like with the weight journey, right? I talk a lot of times about how I get really screwed up by the scale. On an intellectual, so I can be doing all the right things, right? Watching my calories, making sure that I'm accounting for what I'm eating, watching my movement, all the things that we know are helpful in reaching our goals. But if I step on the scale and I'm 5 pounds up from from the weight I was yesterday, on an intellectual level, I know I did not gain 5 pounds of fat yesterday. But it's like on an emotional level, I let it destroy me. I'm sure there's people that can identify with that. And it's kind of like the alcohol was kind of the same way. Like in hindsight, in an intellectual level, you can go, yeah, of course you're going to lose weight when you get rid of alcohol because you're consuming less calories and and you're fixing your metabolism and it's poison for the body and blah, 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 blah. But it's like interesting because like, I don't know whether the mind just does things to justify a behavior or, for me, I think it's as simple as I liked it. It felt helpful to me. And I had cut it out 3 or 4 weeks at a time before and saw no tangible benefit from it. Like, okay, so if it's something I enjoy and I'm not losing weight when I stop it and I don't feel better, I don't look better, why would I take it out of my life? It's something that I enjoy, right? But for me, it was like, it had to be longer, which is interesting because everything sucked until about 3 months. I felt worse. I felt jittery and nervous all the time. I wasn't losing really any weight. But at that 3rd month, it was like all of a sudden I could see it. I'm often doing TikTok videos, so blah, 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 yelling at my phone about GLP-1 medicines. And I noticed like, hey, the filter's not on and my face looks clearer. My skin looks better. And then people started noticing your face looks clear. Like you look really healthy. You look all these things. I'm like, I didn't know I looked unhealthy in the first place. But So much of this is observed kind of in hindsight. And I think that the sticking through the hard part of kind of learning to do life without that chemical as something I relied on for calming myself has been, I wouldn't trade it. In hindsight, it wasn't a hard decision. If I wouldn't have seen the benefits over the long haul, it'd probably be a different story. But
Yeah. Congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment and a wonderful thing for our audience to consider, that your relationship with alcohol, I see that get in the way of people's results all the time. And also just the emotional atrophy. Like when you take away the thing you escape into and you put it on the shelf, it forces you to deal with life on life's terms and to really understand, like, oh, maybe I have some anxiety, or oh, maybe I have some trauma, or maybe I'm a little, whatever that is for you. And then you can work on the root cause of maybe why you needed to numb off, call it numbing, dumbing at the end of the day.
yeah, absolutely. And you know what I realized that alcohol was giving me that I definitely didn't realize when I was using it, and I needed like a long time of clarity to actually see this, is that I always thought of alcohol as a numbing thing in terms of you drink, you get a buzz, your mind lets go of some of the things that you're clenching onto, and it just relaxes your body physically, and then I can lay back and chill. And you think of it as numbing in that sense. I didn't realize this until I was months out of not using alcohol, but I felt everything more on a daily basis. It's not just at night when I was using alcohol. I would wake up in the morning and the sun was shining brighter. The birds were chirping louder. The colors in the trees were popping more. It was almost like my senses in general were dulled from the alcohol, not from being under the influence of alcohol, but it's like, I don't know, there's probably science behind all of this, right? But I didn't realize that until I had months of clarity to be like, wow, even moments with my kids, they would say something or do something in a moment that would have completely passed by me before then, that I see as like these profound little sweet moments.
Yeah, it is sweeter. And I love that we're talking about this. And thank you for sharing your experience, strength, and hope. It's important. And I also want to get into, you're just a wealth of leading edge information in the GLP-1 space, Dave. And so while I've got you here with the time we have, I want to talk about a few things. I was listening to your awesome podcast and YouTube channel. And for our listeners, they definitely have to check you out if they haven't already heard of you. If you feel like breaking news.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I hadn't even heard of gene therapy. Is it RJVA 002 or Revita?
Yeah. So there's this is a company called Fractal Health, and we've had their CEO on a couple times, but he's an endocrinologist who watched his father suffer with the disease of obesity and diabetes. And as an endocrinologist, wanted to find a way to sort of bridge this gap between the metabolic surgeries that are out there and treatments and these new drugs that are just changing the world, right? And so what's cool, so they have two programs. They call it a Rejuva program and a Revita program. So I'll kind of break these two down because they're both very interesting. I'll try to do it quick. So the Revita, REVITA program from Fractal Health, is what they looked at is all these drugs that we talk about, Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy, Zepbound. They're just longer acting analog for like the word, like analogy. They're just analogous to our naturally occurring nutrient stimulated hormones. So in other words, you eat, you make your own body's version of Zepbound. You eat, you make your own version of Ozempic. The problem is that our gut health has been destroyed by, it's hard to point to one culprit. We were talking about the multifactorial disease of obesity earlier. It's genetics. It's the food environment. It's the things we put on our crops. It's the antibiotics we take. It's all these things, I believe, right? Can't prove any of it, but we know we got a problem here in America that seems to be pretty unique to America. And as the rest of the world adopts our diet and way of living, they're getting it too. So these programs that Revita looks at is they look at the duodenum. So you got your, you eat the food, it goes down into your stomach. The first part of your intestines that gets the food is called the duodenum. It's this part right after the stomach. And there's a surface on that duodenum that has been designed to sense the nutrients that you ate and then stimulate the release of hormones in response to the nutrients that it senses. What they have found, and this is sort of the hypothesis of fractal health, is that those cells have been damaged by the foods that we ate, by the alcohol that we consume, all of these things. And so in order to restore those cells to their natural sensing state, what Revita goes in with an endoscopic procedure and does almost like the way they described it the first time I liked it was like a face peel for the surface of your mucus on your duodenum. And so it's just like some hot water. And then they, pull the thing out. And over the next few days, all of those cells regenerate anew. And so what they have found is that restores the sensing capability of those cells to promote the natural release of these nutrient stimulated hormones. So you're just producing hormones better in response to that food.
Whoa. That's
yeah,
amazing.
Isn't that wild? And it's like a 45-minute procedure, outpatient. It's like less prep work than colonoscopy, right? So it was very simple. And this is probably about a year and a half away from being reality for patients in the US if it makes it through all of the FDA filings.
That is amazing. It almost sounds like science fiction. So it's a way of training the body to make its own peptides.
So yeah, it's restoring the body's natural ability to sense the nutrients you eat and release hormones.
Powerful. And how is that different than gene therapy?
So the Rejuva program, and they have two of them. So they have 001 and then they have 002. The first one they started on was 001, and they were looking at a way to, again, these are nutrient stimulated hormones. They were looking at a way to program your body to release more GLP-1 hormone. So that's kind of what Ozempic does in a way, roundabout way. It just gives you a really high, orders of magnitude higher of GLP-1 receptor activity than your endogenous or naturally producing stuff does. And it doesn't break down with DPP-4, which is a byproduct of gut bacteria, which is way in abundance in the guts of people with obesity and diabetes. Many studies that show this. And actually, the drugs that preceded Ozempic were actually called DPP-4 inhibitors. They identified this as problematic to our nutrient-stimulated hormones, and they found a way to block those. Not to get our guts healthy, so we didn't make a bunch of it in the first place, but to just block the DPP-4.
Okay.
And so then that helped to propel this studies around how do we just make GLP-1 last longer once they identified that it helped people to lose weight and control blood glucose. So the Rejuva program is actually a gene therapy, which uses a similar endoscopic procedure and then delivers a gene therapy to your pancreas that just programs your pancreas to release more GLP-1 when you eat. So it helps to get that cell receptor activity. And the end result is that you get more signaling on satiety when you eat. And so in early animal models, it actually showed that it was more effective than semaglutide. But it is a gene therapy. So this one to me gets a little, like you talked about, science fiction-y. This one gets a little out there. Like, I don't want to be the first in line for this one, but it's fascinating. And then, of course, as they saw success with this, tirzepatide comes on the market, this idea of GIP, which is another nutrient-stimulated hormone. And really, tirzepatide is a GIP drug, much more so than it's a GLP-1 drug, like 5 times more GIP than GLP-1. So when they call these all GLP-1s, it's a bit of a misnomer. Yes, there's GLP-1 in tirzepatide, but really what makes it different from Ozempic is it's got GIP in it. It's got it a lot. And the new one coming down the pike, retatrutide, is even more so yet, like 15 times more GIP receptor activity.
So retatrutide, you're taking us there. People are so interested in it. I'm getting up to speed on it, getting access to it. It's not available yet.
Not legitimate from legitimate sources, right? I'm sure I'll set your comments off on that one. So retatrutide is in what's called phase 3 clinical trials. So it has not yet been approved by the FDA for anything. And so Eli Lilly is the discoverer and the ones that are trying to bring retatrutide to the market. But part of their patent process puts the sequence, like all peptides are, for anybody who may not know listening, is just a long chain of amino acids in a specific sequence that is designed to mimic something in your body, in terms of these medications. Retatrutide or retatrutide acts on 3 GLP-1, GIP, and glucagon, which makes it novel, new, exciting. Because that's public information, peptide manufacturers know how to duplicate it. And so there are these companies called research grade peptide companies that operate outside of any regulatory body or agency, and they make allegedly, a copy of retatrutide or hundreds of other peptides. And then they sell it and slap a little thing on it that says not for human consumption. Because again, there's no regulation on it. There's no way to tell that that's retatrutide or whether it's bath salts. I mean, there's no real way to know unless you send it off for testing, et cetera. So because retatrutide is so novel, so breakthrough, and really because, the bottom line is all the drugs that we have prior to retatrutide work what's called centrally on weight loss. In other words, it's the medical term for just reducing the amount of energy you put into your body. Retatrutide does that, but it also actually fixes your metabolism in such a way that you're actually increasing your energy output. So you're decreasing energy in and you're increasing energy out. And those two things work synergistically to really what we'll see in phase 3 trials to really change the game with metabolic health.
I can't wait for it. And I also heard that it's more muscle preserving.
Yeah, potentially. I think so much of that comes down to how trials are designed and what is required of the participants in terms of lifestyle modifications. Like anytime you lose a tremendous amount of weight, there's going to be a certain amount of lean tissue that goes with it. The most problematic when you look at the clinical trials is Ozempic. And I want to say like 30% of that weight loss in the clinical trials came from lean muscle tissue, which is potentially problematic for people, especially in an older population, right? We want weight loss, but the beauty of where we're at now is like these new drugs have the luxury of focusing on the quality of weight loss too. And so even these companies are acquiring other companies with technologies and drugs that help to preserve the muscle mass. So you may see tirzepatide plus an asset that Lilly acquired about 1.5 years, 2 years ago was called, the name escapes me, but it's a muscle preserving agent that they developed for cancer patients. And so, yeah, retatrutide has the potential to be better than tirzepatide. Tirzepatide was better than Ozempic in terms of the quality of your weight loss, and it's only going to get better as time goes on.
Yeah, and I always tell people, eat your protein, do your strength training, that in combination.
That all helps.
That all helps. Better.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is, you asked me earlier, you're like, what's one of those things that you get frustrated about because it's a huge misnomer out there? I would say this one is one of them, because at the end of the day, like if you look at me, like right now I'm a 265 pound guy, but my calves are insane. Like, they look like a bodybuilder's calves because I'm walking around with, a lot of weight up top. I won't need those calves to be as muscular in 2 years if I get down to 200 pounds because I'm not needing to carry around as much weight, right? So there's a certain amount of muscle mass loss is normal, but shoot, if you're able to get in there and optimize it and preserve those insane calves, muscle burns fat, like your body composition, is better at the end of the day, which is potentially a huge benefit to people.
I see what you're pointing at. So someone who's carrying around a large amount of weight, they're carrying 100 extra pounds around, they're going to have extra muscle just to carry that around. So if they lose the fat, they don't need to have that much muscle. So they actually have muscle to lose. And, strength training and eating protein still is important.
Super important. Yeah, to be clear, I would rather be the guy that gets down to 200 pounds and still has amazingly muscular calves. I mean, if that's an option, sign me up.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and that's where the lifestyle piece comes in.
I'm just going to, instead of like every time I stand up, you think about it, like every time I stand up, I'm squatting 265 pounds. So if I want to preserve that amount of muscle mass, I probably better find a way to continue to squat that even if I don't carry that weight, around.
Absolutely. Let's talk access and the FDA's crackdown. That seems like one of your beats. There's so much we could talk to there. I think a lot of people are aware that the FDA is coming after compounding pharmacies, and there's been a lot of there's so much talk about that. Let's just assume people are relatively up to speed with that, or maybe if you could bring us up to speed quickly. What's the leading edge of that conversation? Are they going to shut down compounding pharmacies? What do you see the future for people that want to have more custom doses, microdoses? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So it is a huge topic of conversation. And yeah, we've sort of exhausted all of the things that are sort of playing into that at On the Pen. So I just point people to the YouTube channel and the podcast if you want to keep up on the latest and greatest. To your question though, I don't think they're going to go anywhere. I think you may see some more regulation, like the environment right now, the leading edge, as you say, is probably the negotiations that are taking place about the branded medication within the context of Medicare and the most favored nation's executive order from the administration. Right now, of course, we know that Eli Lilly, we know that Novo Nordisk both want compounds to end. But the reality is there's a carve out for them to make personalized versions of any branded patented medication within the law. And that's all established from an act called the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act from 2013, which carves out 503As who can make a version of any patented drug that's not a biologic to suit a patient's specific individual needs if it's not available in the commercial formulation. That's not going anywhere without a change in law. Now, that said, the government always has the power through government agencies, regulations, et cetera, to make life miserable for the people that do it, right? So I don't think you'll see an act of legislation that changes it. But if the administration really, 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 really wants $150 Ozempic, my guess is that the ask on the pharmaceutical side is going to be like, you got to crack down on these, find a way to wipe out some of our competition through compounding. That's what I'm looking at right now. And just so the question is really if the cost of branded medication comes down to $150, you could argue there's not as much need for compounding, which would be great. I mean, in an ideal world, I think people would all choose to be on the branded medication. But that said, there are people who are looking at some of the clinical study data or preclinical data in animals that are showing, and even some of the select trial for Wegovy data that shows, there's a cardiac benefit from semaglutide, regardless of the dose that you're on and regardless of how much weight you lost. There's probably something identifiable in the future about the specific molecule that's cardiac protective. So if I'm not in an obesogenic state, I'd like to still microdose it because I have a family history of heart failure or heart disease, et cetera. And so I hope for the case of those people and maybe for the people that won't be able to afford the $150 yet on the branded, if that's the way that it goes, that it'll still be available. But I hope that my hope would be that it would be less necessitated.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I love how you cover it. And yes, people should go check out your, where can people find you?
Yeah, we're all over the place, like literally just about any social media platform that millennial would be on. You can find me. I know there's a lot of new ones out there that I don't know about. Our largest probably following is over on TikTok, followed by YouTube, where we have a podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, Instagram, Facebook, we're everywhere. You can go to onthepen.com too. It's a good gateway to find all that.
Okay, and we'll put it all in the show notes. I want to talk a little bit about community, advocacy, and hope. You've built a real movement with On the Pen. Why does community matter so much to you? And why is it important on a health and weight loss journey?
That's another thing that the community taught me. I didn't know this going into this. Like so much of it is just education along the way. And honestly, I think there's just a tremendous amount of validation in the lived experience that somebody else has had to. When you say, I went into the doctor for a sore throat and I left with a lecture about my weight. And that resonates with 100,000 people online that have had a similar experience, their own flavor of that. It's just validating. It sucks to go through that, but it's validating to know I am not the only one that went through it. When we talk about the disease of obesity being multifactorial and that the treatment of a multifactorial disease needs to have many prongs to it, we're talking dietitian, we're talking potentially a counselor, or a therapist, a medical doctor. Community is one of those spokes, right? Because I don't know, for me, the community piece is about endurance. I didn't lose 100 pounds in a year on Ozempic and just say, peace out. And some people do, and more power to them. But like for me, I'm still struggling. And I think even for those, there's a lot of people in our community that have hit maintenance and they're looking to connect with other people that have hit maintenance. Because maintenance, from what I hear, is like the hardest part of the journey. And so just having people that are doing it with you to share tips and tricks to help you get through and just endure. Because this is a lifetime disease. You're going to have it your whole life. It's going to constantly be fighting to come back. there's real power in enduring that journey with other people who are doing the same.
I agree. And thank you for sharing your story. It's really powerful, Dave. And what are you excited about in the next 18 months? I know you've got a book, Decoding GLP-1. And kudos to you, man. Like, I look at your body of work. How do you find the time? You're doing so much.
I have a really great wife. I have a really great sister who helps me out. I just have people around me that have believed in what we've been doing and been willing to support in various ways. But I have to say the most credit goes to my wife, because when I first started this medicine, I made video the first day. And about 6 months into it, I started doing lives every Thursday night. And I said to my wife, I think this might be a thing. And she goes, really? And I said, yeah. And I said, I think I'm going to be doing some really consistent stuff here to see what we can build. And she's like, okay. We have 4 little children. They're ages 12 on down to 5. And the first 10 years of all of their lives, I spent traveling a good bit for the job that I had. And so when I finally got out of that and I said to my wife, I'm going to basically start something that's going to demand a lot of my extracurricular time. And the fact that she supported that and believed in what I did, I mean, all the credit goes to her, because she had to carry a lot of the load at home.
It's wonderful to have that level of support.
To have people that believe in you is everything. I hope that for everybody out there who wants to start something, that they can have somebody in their life that's speaking into the qualities and attributes that they have that can make them successful. It's a luxury for sure.
Dave, you're a good man.
I don't know if I go that far, but the Lord has blessed me tremendously. I'm very thankful for what I have.
You can feel your connection. And I think that's such an important message. I find that when people have a connection with a power greater than themselves, something that they can turn it over to, those are the people that not only get better results, there's a peace and a happiness that comes forward.
You said it. I don't carry the burden of whether this is successful or not. I just don't, financially or otherwise. I know that's not in my hands. What is the effort that I bring every day. And that's just what we try to do. So you just encapsulated the whole thing. If I had to pinpoint what my faith gives me, is to just release that burden of needing to be successful.
Mic drop. I think that's a good place to end it for today.
I really enjoyed this. I love getting a chance to share my story. I don't share it a ton on my own channel, so I love the chance to tell my story. And so I really appreciate you giving me a forum to do that today. And it was a pleasure to meet you too. I'd have you come on the pen sometime and tell yours. I would love to hear more about your story.
Thank you. Well, I would love that. Let's stay connected. And thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.